Hello, Rogers community. You are now tuned in to the Rogers podcast. Get ready to feel inspired, empowered, and to learn from our expert interviews. This podcast is made by the Rogers Group for the Rogers Group. And now, let's dive into today's episode.
Welcome to the Rogers podcast. My name is Robin Chan and I am your host. Yes, we are now on season 2. And today we have none other than Céline, who is the Chief Communication Executive of the Rogers Group. Let's welcome Céline. Céline, welcome on the Rogers podcast.
Thank you so much, Robin. I must say I'm quite excited to be there.
Definitely. Tell us a little bit more about your journey in becoming the Chief Communication Executive at Rogers.
I'm going to try to cut the story short for my journey. So actually I'm born Mauritian, grew up in Mauritius, and I studied actually in France. I spent 10 years there. So I worked in France and started I was very lucky actually to start in the hospitality sector, but in a beautiful palace in Paris.
Ah, wow.
One of the iconic palaces in Paris. So we call them the Maison à la Française. So it's quite an exciting opportunity because you learn a lot of skills and maybe the excellence of service in all ways and all forms. So I had this opportunity for 5 years. And then I came back to Mauritius. And I started my journey back to Mauritius in my home country, going from advertising agencies to the E&L Group, where I spent nearly 7 years. I was communication manager for the real estate, luxury real estate programs, Villa-Valriche, that we know well now in Rogers.
Yes,
definitely. And La Balise Marina, which was the first marina in Mauritius. So all the ERS side, but many of the projects in the property sector. And then I moved to Medin Group to head the corporate communication. I spent 4 years there, quite challenging and a very, how would I say that, formateur experience with a COVID. And I think it was the same for everyone, obviously.
Yes.
And voila, and 4 years after, here I am in Rogers. So it's been 1 year and a half when I've joined the company, the group, and I now head the communication department. For the head office.
Yeah, that's quite a journey. And my intention today is to discover a little bit more about what you do and talk about the main topic here, which is meaningful change. So today we want to talk about the brand of Rogers. The tagline is meaningful change. Tell us a bit more about how this came about.
It's more than a tagline. It's actually a signature, our promesse de marque, as we say in French. So it's really about who we are and what we want to be. It's a real promise about what the group stands for. Meaningful change. So it came along with all an exercise that we made a bit earlier, end of 2022. We had first an audit done and a perception survey with many stakeholders, publics, general public, investors, etc., to understand what was the perception of the group, but also internally, and to understand what were the needs in terms of brand and what were the strengths, but also the weaknesses of a group. We had the good news, we had many strengths we could capitalize on, but we had also some little vulnerabilities that we had to address, obviously, in terms of clarity, of messages, etc. But what was really coming out was this, let's say, culture of Rogers, of being a disruptor, of not to be dependable of change, but to address it and to be at the forefront of driving the change. So change is obviously inevitable.
Yes.
But we want to make the most of it, and we want to ensure that this change is going to be meaningful. Meaningful means people, planet, prosperity.
Yes.
Just not about business, but it's how we do it, how it's impactful for our people, and obviously for the organization, but also outside the organization.
Yeah. So what do you want to see right now at Rogers, in the Rogers Group, in terms of how do you create that meaningful change? Where we are already creating meaningful change, but where we are right now and where we want to be in a few years' time?
It's a very good question because it's quite interesting. We are actually at the very moment working on the CAPS 26 strategy. So we are working on our 3-year strategic plan. And obviously this is the question that is
Yes.
driving everything that we are doing.
Yes.
So what is meaningful change? Meaningful change, it's not just how I see it, it's how as an organization we see it and we all adapt it to our behaviors.
Yeah.
And it's so vast actually, because you can do so many things and it's on every plan, so being professional, being your skills, soft skills, hard skills, being caring about your colleagues, etc., etc. So I think the real meaningful change is about how we, in our day-to-day, we have in mind at every moment that is what I'm doing the correct way of doing it, and how can I improve it for it to be meaningful. Be it in my relationships with others, but also in the way I'm driving my business.
Yes.
So, and it comes from a business perspective. Am I going to do my operations this way or this way, and how I'm going to drive business for the next 3 years? But also, for instance, in my department, I'm talking about communication. We also have disruptions. How are we bringing meaningful change to the organization? But also, how do we adapt to change? How are we on the forefront of change to be sure that we are not left behind and that we are able to adapt to an ever-changing, evolving world? And you have quite interesting topics like that, like ChatGPT. I don't know if you followed and you have tested it yourself.
Yes, I've tested it.
And
it's quite an impressive tool.
Yeah, and I think we had another turn of the world, and we are seeing another way of doing, and it's impacting the HR point of view, it's impacting all professional point of views are impacted by this new tool that is going to change the way we do business, actually.
You're talking about ChatGPT on one of the ways we can use as a tool, but what are the things that you use in creating meaningful change in your department?
It goes on so many levels again. I think as a communication department, our role comes on different levels. Obviously, once we have a strategy, it's to explain to people what is meaningful change, is to share the stories that are bringing meaningful change in the organization also. So it's give value and visibility to all these stories for people to understand what it is, how it works, etc., etc. But also it's also to increase awareness on how we all can bring meaningful change. Because if we just have a tagline and then we say, okay, this is our new tagline, and then it's just on a piece of paper, it won't mean anything. So I think the role of a communication department is to bring ideas, is to bring the subject in all our stories, strategies at all levels, because obviously we are sitting around the tables of many other departments or subsidiaries or companies. So we are talking to a lot of people, and it's to bring back always this idea of meaningful change across the organization.
Definitely with meaningful stories behind everything that we do at Rogers, right? So what are the things that is so far we have done that is meaningful at Rogers?
Rogers has a 125 years old long story. Next year we are celebrating our 125 year anniversary. So the group has always been part of the social and economical development of the country. It has led the tourism industry, it has been driven the aviation industry, in logistics, in the malls, etc., etc. So all these companies, all these operations have for years have had an impact on not only the economical part, but on the social part also of the country. So it has been an amazing contribution as a group since years. So this is not something that we are saying that we have just started. But what was the way of doing things 100 years ago or 25 years ago or even 10 years ago, obviously is not the same way. And now sustainability has become more and more important. Sensibility on the broad spectrum of sustainability. So it's been already more than a decade now that the group has also embraced all the environmental and social, also inclusiveness, I would say, rather than social, part of its transformation. And now we are really accelerating this process. And I think this is the real transformation. So it goes on so many levels. Again, I'm keeping saying so many levels because it's so true that meaningful change tackles so many levels. And
it's more of like continuity from what we have always been doing, right? It is not changing our brand exactly. It's more to realign ourselves to make it more meaningful.
exactly.
Yeah.
The vision remains the same. Our values have slightly evolved. Now we have agility, engagement, and excellence as values. The way we have been doing business and the impact we are having on the communities and on the country, and not just on the country, because the group is international. So
Yes.
we are now in 12 countries with over 123 workplaces around the world. So the group is having obviously an impact since a long while. So no, we are not starting a new clean sheet. So we are building on our legacy, but we are changing, we are transforming it. We are improving it always. And I think this is what being disruptive is how you can always challenge yourself to do better and to be a vehicle for positive change.
Yeah. In terms of personal level, you want to talk about impact. You want to talk about meaningful change. How can we create that meaningful change as individuals for the Rogers community? I mean, all those people at Rogers right now, as employee, how are we going to create that meaningful change?
I think it's very important at every moment to have in mind the 3 Ps that we have been building on our strategy, people, planet, and prosperity. I will start by the obvious one, which is prosperity.
Yeah.
But of course, it's to have a sustainable business in terms of profits, because we need profitability, but not on the short term. So it's how in our everyday life and work life do we impact in what we do, the company, to ensure that on the long term it has profits, obviously, but this means long term means also to be prepared towards all risks that can come also. So how does your business will be future fit also? How can we impact our colleagues, our communities? What can we do? And even for the planet, it's terrible, because when you start looking on how you impact on as an individual, even at work, the planet, sometimes we don't even realize. Everything that you do, from using your computer to printing a paper, to the lights, to everything, is impacting the planet.
Everything that you do.
Each time you take your car on your own, just for one person, is impacting the planet. So it's being conscious, but also in terms of operations. How are your operations being impacting the planet? How can you change things? And obviously change can't come overnight. It's a process. We can't be perfect everywhere now. It would be great, I would love to, but unfortunately we can't change everything overnight, because there's impact on businesses and jobs and everything. So, but how do we put a roadmap as individuals to say, okay, how can I bring value? And I think it's quite rewarding, because you actually find ways to bring value in what you do. It's just not about ticking boxes and about just doing your job. It's how are you going to be meaningful in what you do.
Yes.
And you can also bring him at home, obviously, on the way, and being conscious. I think it's all about being conscious at every moment,
Yeah. When you talk about being conscious, there's a challenge somewhere. Like, why do people not being conscious now? Like, why are they not creating that meaningful change? So what is the challenge behind that?
It's more a societal issue, I think. This is completely my personal views, obviously. I really think that, unfortunately, for decades and centuries, we have been looking for comfort, health, always possible. So we just want comfort, and we don't want people that will bring issues and will lower what we have earned for years. So people, at some stage, just don't even question where things come from. It's just a part of your everyday. And I think it's really important to understand how things, and to be curious. And this is how you become conscious. When you start reading the little lines behind the packaging that you are buying, understand how is meat being processed and where it comes from, what's your impact as a household, etc., etc. It changes completely the way you will see the world. And also, we live with our friends, our families, so we have time for ourselves, and we try to find time sometimes just for even our close family and relatives. We don't have enough time sometimes. And I think it's very important to get out of his comfort zone, to go and see the others' realities. And the others' realities is the major reality sometimes. And it's, I think this connection to the reality of our country, but also other countries, is very important. And this goes by being curious, by caring. Caring maybe is the good word. To resume, I would say that consciousness is linked to curiosity.
So what is the impact that you want to see at Rogers, let's say, by next year?
I think we are on the very good track to achieve many commitments, actually. Being on the good track doesn't mean everything again is perfect. We still have a lot of work to do, but the group has been bringing value, and we talk about it already in terms of social impact and economic impact for more than a century. But all the transformation that started, and I was saying that we're accelerating now, is going to bring an amazing impact, I think, in terms of even our commitments. And maybe it's not an impact on, for instance, we committed for net zero, to achieve net zero by 2050. It might not be an impact direct on carbon emissions, because Mauritius is a very small contributor. So Rogers in Mauritius is an even smaller contributor. But it's also leading by example. It's also doing our part. And if everyone does its part, then we can imagine having a better world tomorrow. But it's also about being attuned with our world and also finding opportunities. So this commitment forces us to transition to new ways of doing business. And these new ways of doing business obviously will create new opportunities, new businesses that don't exist now. We know that most of the jobs in 30 years' time don't exist now, but so are some businesses, and we'll have to adapt to it. So I think we have well started this journey. For instance, we have a beautiful example, which is in Belle-Ombre. All we can see now, you go in Belle-Ombre. This is something that started years ago. Obviously, you can't do that on one day, but you need a clear roadmap, and you need to have clear actions and a commitment of a group. And I think this is what the beauty that we can sense now within the group is that everyone across all subsidiaries are really committing to actually have an impact for the employees, but also for the communities, but also for the businesses, and working together on this. And Belle-Ombre is a beautiful example of transformation to ideas to be the reference in sustainable tropical art de vivre. And we have an entity with Agria, with Rogers Hospitality there. We have Villa Valriche in terms of property and real estate. It's quite amazing the way we have found to work together around a common goal. And it's already bringing value to all the region and attracting tourists and attracting new businesses there that are all driven by this same vision. So you can see the impact of one commitment, how it's creating value on all the chain. And I think what I want to see is obviously more and more of these kind of initiatives happening within the group, and we are already implementing them. So now we are going to see the results coming.
You're talking about creating value for the group itself. And just to summarize a little bit of what we talk about, you talk about creating meaningful change in terms of a whole as the group, and you talk about in terms of individuals, and you talk about especially for the community itself. It is not just that specific, but it's more for everyone. Everyone can get involved, everyone can create an impact. So just before we end, tell us, what would be a meaningful change that you want to see for the Rogers Group, and especially for the Rogers community? What is the meaningful change that we can start to make right now?
What is your meaningful change?
Well, my meaningful change is to be able to be better at this podcast. Well, it is basically for me to be able to communicate, as you're part of a communication department. But for us, what we want to do is to be able to educate, empower, and enable people through this podcast. And we want to reach out to everyone. So to create that meaningful change starts from here, is to be able to distribute to every people, every part of the Rogers community.
You have answered very well the question. I'm sorry I asked on the other side the question, but why I did it is that it's my point, the point I was making earlier. Caring for what you do and not just ticking a box.
Yeah.
You could do a podcast and just say, I have this guy coming and having various topics, and it's entertaining. You don't just want to entertain. You're trying to bring subjects that matters, subjects that will help people grow, develop, maybe talk about things also that can have an impact on the long term.
Yeah.
So you're trying to bring value to what you do, and it's just about doing your job. And this is where your job is not just about having a job. It's where it starts to be rewarding for you. So I think this is all the challenge for us, and this is a culture, because and it's a culture development program that we have to implement also, and that we have started obviously, including through the podcast. Because this is one of the various tools that we can use to educate, but educate also on this need of consciousness, on this need of caring, this need to change the consciousness to a behavior. Yeah. And this is the biggest challenge for, I think, everyone.
Mm-hmm. So to be self-aware and to change that consciousness to behavior itself.
Right.
Very good. Thank you very much. And that's all for the Rogers podcast. Thank you very much to be our guest on the Rogers podcast.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning to the Rogers podcast. I hope you gained some useful insight. We want to create more content like these to empower, to educate, to enable you to shape a better tomorrow. We are on our website, which is on podcast.rogers.mu. And if you want to see more of us, don't forget to just tune into that. And thank you very much. That's all for today. Until next time, see you again.